I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and welcome. This is Joe DeMar, and for the next hour, I'm going to be your host here on For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a program where we talk about things that environmental, things ecological, things that affect you personally and your family, your pocketbook, your health, because ultimately the environment does determine how wealthy all of us are and how healthy all of us are. Because without a healthy environment, you can't be healthy or wealthy or happy, in my opinion. And I was actually kind of happy this morning driving into this show, getting ready to do the program. I was coming in. It's just around dawn as I was driving in, and I'm going to use a word I love to use on the radio. It's one of my favorite words. It's the word crepuscular, and crepuscular means it's that red light that you sort of get at dawn and dusk, and that really beautiful light, and that's how the dawn was. And I was driving in in the crepuscular light, and I was missing all the lights. I was missing like every stoplight, and I was getting kind of frustrated. But then, as I was driving on River Road in Maumee, this beautiful, healthy deer comes walking up to the road. I'm the only car on the road at that hour, and it stops on the edge. And I was a little worried. I thought it might run in front of me, but no, it stopped and it waited, and it just watched me go by, and then it calmly walked across the road over to the riverbank. And it's just a reminder that you never know what is going to happen. Something might seem like it's a bad thing, like I'm missing all those lights. I was getting frustrated. It added about 10 minutes to the drive. But if I hadn't missed all those lights, I would have missed that deer. The timing was perfect because I missed all the lights. And that's how I feel about this time right now. We have in office and in control of the Senate a president and a party that are bent on reversing environmental progress. They're bent on destroying our ecological balance in the country. And if you wanted to argue with me on that point, say, oh no, the Republicans aren't that bad. They're not really trying to destroy the environment. I'd be happy to discuss that with you. And you can call in at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. We're going to open up the phone lines at about 8:15. But we have this president in office who's doing all these terrible things, environmentally speaking, and it's frustrating, and we're falling behind. We actually increased our global greenhouse gas emissions in this country by 1 to 2% in the last couple of years. But I think that's ultimately going to lead us into a better place. I think that ultimately there's going to be reaction against this sort of thing. People are going to see, and people increasingly are seeing, the effects of global warming. Storms keep damaging property. Our heating bills and our cooling bills are going through the roof. because as predicted, we're getting more extremes of hot and cold. We are all personally getting hurt by global warming, and 70 to 80%, depending on the poll, understand this. I mean, most of us, 3/4 of us roughly, know and accept that global warming is real, that we have to stop putting carbon in the air. We still have that 25 to 35% that just don't get it. But even they slowly are getting it. It's becoming so clear and so obvious that nobody can deny it. I mean, I saw, in addition to the deer I saw this morning, I also saw geese heading north in February. I mean, geese are supposed to head north in the spring, and they were these little isolated flocks of geese. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I would see huge flocks of geese, and of course, my parents and my grandparents saw even bigger flocks of birds, and of course, go back even farther, and you would have flocks of birds that literally darkened the sky, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. And we can get back to that. Nature is resilient enough that if we just stop destroying it, if we just stop hurting nature, it will recover, it will heal. And so one of the keys to stopping, we have to stop digging. If we want don't want the hole any deeper, you have to stop digging. And one of the things that we have to do in order to do that is to shut down nuclear power. Nuclear power, if you are an environmentalist, if you are an ecologist, you understand that putting radioactive pollution into the environment is literally one of the worst things you can do for life. Radiation is inimical to life. Radiation is kind of the opposite of life, because life is this beautiful process where organisms take in molecules and energy from their environment, and they organize them into these wonderful, beautiful cells and plants and animals, and then they replicate themselves. That's life. What radiation is radiation you have these radioactive atoms that an organism will take them in, and then at some point the atom explodes, literally blows up. It's like, I call it a suicide bomber, because you can't tell it from a regular atom chemically. So your body takes it in, helps put it into the organization of its cells in its body, and then it blows up, damaging and killing the cells around it, and it can cause cancer and a host of other diseases. We always hear about cancer and radiation. Well, radiation can cause heart disease because the radioactive atoms damage the lining of the blood vessels. Radiation can also damage your organs, like your pituitary gland, and so that can cause all kinds of problems. So, excuse me. So we're going to have a guest calling in at 8:15. Kevin Kamps. He's with an organization called Beyond Nuclear, and that's just the kind of optimistic organization. I mean, imagine a future beyond nuclear. Imagine when we don't have to be debating about these horrible nuclear power plants and fighting them at every turn, and it's just accepted that, okay, that was a bad idea. We did it for 50, 60 years. It didn't really work in terms of promised benefits, because when they started building them, they were promising electricity too cheap to meter, and instead it turned out to be the most expensive form of electrical generation that there is. So it didn't pan out. We did it for a while. We stopped. We got over it. Won't that be nice, the beyond nuclear future? So anyway, Kevin's going to call in at 8:15, and we're going to be talking about this proposed bailout for First Energy for the Davis Besse nuclear power plant, and how that is, if it goes through, it's going to hurt you personally, economically. Your electric bills will go up, and we don't need to do it. We don't need nuclear power, not in this time of wonderful solar power and wind power. Anyway, that's at 8:15. We also are going to have some advertising. We're going to be hearing from our wonderful sponsors, the Wood County Park District and DeMar Computer Consulting. That's going to happen at the bottom of the hour. And then I'm going to tell you about an interesting event, an interesting action against nuclear power that you can participate in, no matter where you are or what your circumstances. It's called Unplug Nuclear Power, and we're going to be talking about that after the bottom of the hour. And of course, we're going to have our letter from the future, which is the letter from my great-great-granddaughter, Marie I, who's living in the year 2299. And every week she sends me a letter. And it's very nice. There's a little flash of photons next to my bed, and poof, there's this letter from the future. So that's coming up after the bottom of the hour. And but this is the best show in the Toledo area, but it gets better every time you call. And I'm really hoping that we can get some callers in this show at 866-240-1065. I'd really like to hear from you. This is our 8th episode. So we've taken it around a few times. We've broken it in. What do you think? Do you like this show? Do you like the way we're presenting this information? Do you not like it? Is there something you think we could improve? Or do you think, like the letter we got last week from the Hill Valley Homeowners Association, do you think we should just go away? Do you think we should just stop? I'm interested in your opinion. So please give us a call at 866-240-1065, after 8:15. And looking forward to talking to you. So in environmental news this week, well, in the main news, in the big news, excuse me, you probably couldn't help but hear about the whole Trump exceeding his presidential authority, and the House is passing a resolution telling him that he's exceeded his authority by declaring this emergency in order to build the wall down south. Well, that's true. In my opinion, Trump has exceeded his authority. There is no emergency, and making this decision will hurt the country. It will hurt our democracy, because if he gets away with it, it gives the president incredible power. Essentially, whatever a president wants to do, anything, he could just declare an emergency. In my opinion, that's an emergency. You don't have croissants at this restaurant. Well, that's a presidential emergency. Get the military over here. I want my croissants. It's crazy. But he's also using this presidential authority. He's been exceeding this presidential authority in a lot of environmental and ecological ways also. He has been turning back environmental regulations that were put in place in order to protect us. And one of the most heinous things he's been doing is eliminating national monuments. Now, a president can declare an area a national monument if it has great historical or environmental significance. And it's within his authority. It's been clearly said that presidents can do this. But what has never been done before, and what Trump is doing and exceeding his authority in doing, is eliminating national monuments. The best example is a national monument called Bears Ears National Monument, and it's a desert ecosystem. It's mostly rock, but there is a lot of life there. There's a lot of animals, and historically, it's very significant because it was an area where Native American people, they have a lot of graveyards there. A lot of natives were interred in that area. And Barack Obama is the one who declared it a national monument, but he only did that after there were literally decades of activism on the part of the Native Americans that live in that area, the people who believe in the historical significance of the area, environmentalists. This huge coalition of people in that area asked this to be made into a monument so it could be protected. And Barack Obama did that in his last year of his presidency. And then Trump is just reversing it. He's saying, nah, I don't care. Who cares what, if there's Native Americans buried there, we're going to dig them up. And that's the plan now, that they're going to open it up to oil and gas exploration. They're going to destroy this national monument because Trump again, exceeded his authority. He reversed a decision by a previous president and took an area that was protected and has decided simply to destroy that. And that's just one example. He's doing this with literally dozens of national monuments and protected areas. Once again, they're trying to open up the National Wildlife Refuge for oil and gas drilling. And that is just, it's just an example that this president and this party that supports that president does not know how to govern. Because if you govern wisely, you present the future with more resources. If you govern wisely, you create more opportunities for the next generation. And instead, what this president and what this party is doing is they're eliminating possibilities. They're eliminating the environment that supports all of us and they're reducing the benefits and the opportunities our children are going to have. So the reason they can do this, the reason Trump feels confident in doing this, he doesn't have the support of the people. He's got his little tiny minority that will support him literally no matter what he does. I mean, he's joked about being able to shoot someone in the street and his base will still love him. I mean, that's literally true, but that's a tiny minority. The majority of the people don't want these things to happen. They don't want us to increase our global gases. They want us to protect beautiful areas like the Bears Ear National Monument. But what he does have is support of the corporations. And he feels that's all he needs. He's got a lot of businesses with billions of dollars behind him. They can pump out billions of dollars of political ads. And he figures, I don't need the people anymore. I've got the corporations. They're on my side. And unfortunately, we are being faced with that very situation right here in Ohio, because right now we have a nuclear power plant, Davis Besse, which should be shut down. It is literally falling to pieces. It needs billions of dollars in repair. But instead of shutting it down and switching to clean, cheap energy, which will lower our bills, and in some places, literally, people aren't being metered for electricity. If they're getting their own solar, their power is too cheap to meter. But instead, they want to take billions of dollars from us to prop up this nuclear plant, and they've created a fake citizens group. It's funded by First Energy. It's funded by the company that owns Davis Besse, and they're lobbying our legislature right now, the people's legislature, and trying to get them to support this bailout for Davis Besse. And for an idea of just how bad an idea that is, I've called on Kevin Kamps. Kevin is he works for an organization called Beyond Nuclear, and he's worked on Davis Besse for many years. And Kevin, I believe you are with us now. Is that correct?
Hello. Yes, I am.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure. Glad to be here.
Okay. Well, Kevin, I would like you to talk to our listeners a little bit just about what this means if Davis Besse gets the bailout. What will this do for people's electric bills, for example?
Yeah, well, like you said, Davis Besse was supposed to close by now. It was originally licensed for 40 years of operation beginning in 1977, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to go into permanent shutdown. But unfortunately, the company applied to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for a 20-year license extension. And we fought that really hard. Yeah, it was Earth Day 2017 was supposed to be the last day of operations, coincidentally. That's when they fired up back in 1977. So we saw that as a very auspicious date that they should shut down by. And it wasn't just because we're anti-nuclear or huggers or it was Earth Day. It was because Davis Besse is one of the most dangerous atomic reactors in the country. It's had more close calls with disaster than any other single reactor in the U.S. and perhaps even the world. And we can give more specifics about that. And then most recently, right in the middle of our fight to shut down Davis Besse, it came to light, and this was just after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, that the shield building, the last line of defense on containment at Davis Besse, is crumbling. It's severely cracked. and it gets worse with every freeze-thaw cycle. And there are a lot of those in northern Ohio every year. Every time it freezes and then thaws, the cracks grow by a half inch or more. So
wow.
There's real questions about whether that last line of the containment, the shield building, will do its job if there's a reactor meltdown. And it's so bad, we learned from First Energy itself that the exterior of the shield building, you could have concrete spalling, large chunks of concrete falling off, falling to the ground below. And sure enough, there are safety systems, structures, and components located down below the exterior of the shield building. What that means is that the shield building that's supposed to contain the radioactivity in a meltdown could actually initiate the meltdown if it hits the right safety system in just the wrong kind of way, initiate the meltdown, and then not contain the meltdown that it itself initiated. That's how bad things are.
Wow. Well, of course,
and your question...
the pro-nuclear people would say, like, well, what are the odds of that? Well, it's kind of like...
Greater than zero.
Yeah, it's kind of like the odds of missing every light on the way into your radio program. I mean, it happens. Sometimes you do miss every light.
And it's not just the safety risks, and that was just a small sample of what the risks are at Davis Besse. It has other serious problems. For example, reactor pressure vessel embrittlement, which is a problem with pressurized water reactors. It's the neutrons hitting the metal of the reactor pressure vessel, weakening it severely to the point where, if it's bad enough, you could have, like a hot glass under cold water, only add 2,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. You could have a fracture of the reactor pressure vessel if the emergency core cooling system is ever activated. It's cold water hitting that hot metal. They've got that problem at Davis Besse. It may not be the worst in the country. That's probably Palisades in Michigan or Point Beach in Wisconsin. There's some others on that short list, including a unit at Beaver Valley, right on the Ohio line in Shippingport, Pennsylvania. That's on the short list of 5 worst. But Davis Besse has this problem too, and now they want to keep pushing it, not just for 40 years, but now for 60 years. And your question about the money, that's how they're going to keep operating, because they've been in the red. They've been losing money at Davis Besse. Even though they're not doing the repairs and the replacements that need to be done, they're still losing money. So not only at the state level, but even at the federal level, they're trying to get these massive bailouts. We're talking probably hundreds of millions per year.
Right. I want to touch on that with a little more detail there, that they've been deferring maintenance. If you have a house and you've got a leak in the roof, you know that if you defer maintenance, that leak is just going to get worse and worse. And this is something that the people who run Davis Besse should know better than anyone, because the deferred maintenance is part of what led to their, it's called the hole in the head disaster. Where they had, literally our nuclear plant came within 3/8 of an inch of a meltdown because they deferred maintenance. And while it was deferred, this boric acid that was leaking from a control nozzle ate through the top of the reactor head all the way down to the stainless steel inner lining, which is only 3/8 of an inch thick. And if it had gone just a little longer, we would have been Fukushima. Toledo would be an abandoned city now, kind of like the way they are in Fukushima. And but they're doing it again. This boggles my mind.
And it's a lot older now. That was back in 2002, so now we're 17 years beyond that in terms of operations at Davis Besse. So they're really pushing the safety limits in all kinds of ways. And they're after your wallet, too. That's the crazy thing. Not just at the state level, but at the federal level. First Energy is really leading the charge in the country for nuclear power and coal bailouts. And unfortunately, talk about a radioactive swamp monster, but Rick Perry, the Energy Secretary, his former runs for president, he ran a couple times, I think, and his campaign manager, Jeff Miller, in those runs for president, is now a top lobbyist for First Energy. He's a freelancer, but he's been hired by First Energy. And guess what? He's got the ear of Rick Perry, his former boss, and guess what? He's got the ear of President Trump. And so there's traction with Trump and with Perry for this First Energy bailout, but not just First Energy. They want to bail out really the entire fleet of old atomic reactors in this country. And that's how it's working, is something as simple as this guy, Jeff Miller, having dinner with Donald Trump last year.
Was it at
and
Trump
then
Towers?
All of a sudden, I'm sorry?
Was it at Trump Towers at this dinner? I don't know. Go ahead.
I'm not sure where. I think the dinner took place at the White House.
Oh.
And then Trump comes out of the dinner almost immediately, certainly the next day, at a rally. It was really weird. Trump rallies are weird just in general, but in this particular case, one of the chants that Trump led, and he was talking about this nuclear and coal bailout during this rally, I think it was in Pennsylvania, was something like, "Gimme 202, we need 202," and probably nobody knew what he was talking about, and maybe they thought he was talking about the area code in Washington, D.C. What he was talking about was a very obscure, arcane passage in an obscure law that gives the federal government the power to bail out electricity plants that are in trouble in a time of war or in a time of natural disaster. And it was Section 202 of this law.
Wow.
And obviously, Jeff Miller had planted this idea in his head the night before, and here he is trying to lead a chant about it at a big rally. So that's how it works.
They might as well have been chanting, "Take all our money, take all our money," because I think the one thing that a lot of people don't know about the nuclear industry is that they have never had a project come in on time or under budget. And if First Energy gets this bailout, they're going to spend billions trying to fix this shield building, which is literally in danger of falling apart. And for a little idea, a taste of how much that's going to cost us, how much our bills are going to go up, could you talk a little bit about what's going on down with the Vogtle plants down in Georgia? Vogtle, down in Georgia.
Yeah. One thing, lest I forget to say it.
Okay.
Tim Judson at Nuclear Information and Resource Service led a press conference that also featured Peter Bradford from Union of Concerned Scientists, who's a former nuclear regulatory commissioner. He served during the 3 Mile Island accident 40 years ago. And also on there was Tyson Slocum from Public Citizen. And the amount of money is mind-boggling. So they did some calculations, and they determined that if this First Energy bailout were to take place nationwide at all of the atomic reactors, it would be $17 billion per year that the American people would be forking over to these dangerously old atomic reactors. And if you add coal, it would be an equal amount. So a total of $34 billion per year in public subsidy going to these dirty, dangerous, and expensive energy industries. So that gives you a ballpark figure. And then at Vogtle, these are the only 2 proposed new atomic reactors under construction in the United States, which is the good news, because that means something like 36 others got canceled. That's the really good news. The bad news at Vogtle is, again, that same lobbyist who works for First Energy also worked for Southern Nuclear at Vogtle and got the Trump administration, Energy Secretary Perry, to add to a nuclear loan guarantee backed by federal taxpayer dollars that Obama had already begun with Ernest Moniz at the Energy Department, but they added to it just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, unannounced. It was now a done deal. Trump added $3 billion, and Obama had already given $8 billion. And the whole figure now, because it was $3.7 billion added, $8.3 billion from before, it's $12 billion in U.S. federal taxpayer-backed nuclear loan guarantees. And if that project goes belly up and they default on their loan, that money is lost to the U.S. Treasury. I mean, some companies were paid that money, but taxpayers will be out the money. Georgia electric ratepayers won't be getting any electricity if this thing goes belly up, and it probably will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was another reactor that did just go belly up not long ago, and the ratepayers in that state are getting charged for it anyway. Because that was a twin project, really, the same reactor designs at Summer Nuclear Power Plant in South Carolina, 2 units 2 and 3,
and a total loss of $9 billion. And there are efforts to try to recoup some of that money and get it returned to ratepayers, but as you said, they're just out the money right now.
Yeah, and this is what happens when corporations like First Energy get to control our treasury. They increase our taxes, they increase our electric bills for their own profit, because let's face it, that's what they're designed to do. But democracy is not supposed to work that way. I think if you asked the vast majority of people on the street here in Ohio, do you want your rates to go up and your taxes to go up to keep a nuclear plant running when we've got wind and solar that can provide the same electricity much cheaper and much, much more safely? I think the vast majority would say, no, we don't want that. But right now, as you've described, these corporations have undue influence on our democratic process. And this is so the nuclear problem is part of the bigger problem. But what can people do right now if people don't want this to happen, if they don't want their bills to go up? How can they help prevent it?
Well, I think folks should let their feelings be known, especially to elected officials at all levels. At the federal government, I'm based in D.C., so that's usually my perspective on things. You've got the U.S. House of Representatives, you've got the U.S. Senate, which could make some noise against this federal bailout for sure. So folks should call their local elected officials. And in fact, Marcy Kaptur in the Toledo area is a very powerful Democratic House member. She's got seniority, so she's, chair of important appropriations committees and subcommittees. She could make a big difference on this issue. And then at the local level, the state level, the same thing, since First Energy is trying to get money from all these sources. So I just urge folks to contact their elected officials. Another idea is letters to the editor and op-eds in newspapers. Let your neighbors know what's going on. Just make some noise and shine some light on it. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to mention real quick that Ernest Moniz, Obama's energy secretary, went to work for Southern Nuclear after he gave them this $8.3 billion nuclear loan guarantee. He's now on their board of directors. So it's not just the revolving door on the Republican side, it's also on the Democratic side.
So he's getting paid. He's making money off of this, even if his company didn't, and even if the ratepayers got stuck for it.
Yeah, and because there's no skin in the game from the company, that's why they're willing to take these financial risks with the public's money, and we saw how that went in South Carolina.
Right. So an environmental issue, also a political issue, and do we have a call, Daniel? And it's something that you can do something about, especially at the state level. Our state reps and state senators right now are being lobbied by First Energy. But if they hear from actual people, actual voters, if they know people are listening and paying attention, they're a lot less likely to stick you with the bill, because they basically these things do best. They happen the most often when no one knows what's going on, when it's completely in the dark, and people don't have to, people don't know that they're being screwed. So we're happy to give that service here to be able to tell people what's going on. And we actually have a caller, Becca. So, Kevin, do you want to hang on for a second? We'll take this call together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Becca, go ahead.
Hi there. I called because I'm up early because apparently the wind apocalypse is coming, and I had to walk the dog before that happened.
Oh, yes.
Because the weather is crazy now. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, could you maybe talk a little bit about the voting record of like local legislators, some of the longer term ones on the nuclear issue?
Well, do you want to take that for the federal legislators, Kevin?
Sure. Yeah. I'm more familiar with Kaptur. She tries to appear to be objective about the nuclear power issue, but I think she's very supportive of Davis Besse and First Energy, brings up the jobs out there, when in fact, even if the plant were to close, there would be decommissioning and dismantlement and cleanup work and nuclear waste safeguarding work that would go on for years and decades to come, actually. So those are jobs too. And of course, jobs in renewables are jobs too. So one memory I have is there was a big meeting at Camp Perry near Davis Besse after the cracking had been first revealed in the Shield building, and Captor was there, Kucinich was there. They were just entering into that primary where they had to go against each other in the primary because the Republicans in the Ohio State House had gerrymandered Kucinich's district out of existence and put him into Captor's district essentially. And she won that primary and now, won the general. So she's been pretty supportive of First Energy and its requests. They haven't always been passed into law, but she's been supportive. So it's kind of an ongoing battle. And I'll just tell one last story that Terry Lodge, the attorney from Toledo who represents us in many of these fights, came to Washington, D.C. last May for the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability D.C. Days, and we had a meeting with Captor staff about the issue of these proposed dumps out west for the high-level waste. And unfortunately, Captor and many others had voted in favor of this. It did not become law. It didn't pass the Senate side. But her staff was so dismissive. We were meeting with high-level staff in the office, about a half dozen staffers, and we showed them the maps of what the transportation routes would look like through the Toledo area, hauling not just Davis Besse's waste, but waste from other states through your area. And they were very, very dismissive of the maps, which was very alarming because these are high-risk shipments, and they seem to not care. Mm-hmm. So I think that gives you some idea of what we're up against with Captor's office anyway.
Well, Captor's position on nuclear power has kind of devolved because right after the hole-in-the-head incident where Davis Besse nearly melted down, at that time she was actually calling for Davis Besse to shut down. She recognized, this is a threat to my constituency. If my congressional district becomes a radioactive wasteland, there's not going to be anybody there to vote for me. But then, mostly responding to pressure from the unions, she has essentially reversed herself on that, which means that we have, as far as I know, we have no one that's good on this issue. The Republicans, like Teresa Gavarone, as far as I know, are leaning towards giving the bailout. And Randy Gardner, he's gone now, but our local politicians are all leaning toward giving the bailout, and so nobody locally that I know of is good on the nuclear issue. So, sorry to disappoint you, Becca. Oh, I guess Becca's gone. Oh wait, are you still there, Becca? Oh, okay. Well, maybe she put her phone on mute or something. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. And one other thing I would say that people can do is to join organizations like Beyond Nuclear and the Nuclear Information Resource Service, organizations that I've been following this for decades, and I'm always awed by how you guys, with a tiny fraction of the resources, are able to hold at bay these huge corporations that are trying to foist nuclear power on us. And I attribute it in part to your zeal, which is, admirable, but also in part to the fact that you guys are peddling the truth in this debate. And they're peddling falsehoods, and it takes a lot more energy to push through something that's not true.
Yeah, and we've got the grassroots behind us. We are a part of the grassroots, and that's how we're able to, be so involved at Davis Besse. I was just going to say one thing, Joe, that sure. You had mentioned that, they would repair the Shield building at Davis Besse. They have tried to do some repairs when we were demanding it, that, oh, no, we don't need to do repairs. Well, they finally did. But what's incredible and hard to wrap your head around is these massive amounts of money that they're trying to get a hold of from the public. There's no guarantee whatsoever that they would actually use it for repairs or replacements. I know it's hard to think, it's unthinkable, but really where that money is going to go is into the pockets of the executives, into the pockets of shareholders, and that's their plan. People paid. And yeah, maybe they will use some of the money for maintenance, but these major repairs like the Shield building, which would cost literally billions of dollars to replace, they're not going to do that. And the reactor pressure vessel, it would be cheaper to build a new atomic reactor than to replace these major nuclear components. the reactive pressure vessel they're not going to replace, and so they're willing to just keep on operating this ever deeper into uncharted risk territory.
Wow. So that kind of puts the cherry on it, that we could get stuck for this bill, and it turns out that they're not going to deliver the goods or the services. We're just going to get the bill. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Thank you, Kevin, very much for joining us. We got to move on. We've only got 1 hour, unfortunately, but
thank you, Joe.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Good to be with you.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, that was Kevin Kamps with his chilling story of what's going to happen if they manage to get this bailout. They're just going to take your money, and then it turns out they're not going to actually give us anything in return for it. So do you want your electric bills and your taxes to go higher for no reason? If so, you should support the bailout. If not, you should oppose it. Anyway, on to other things. Right now we're past the bottom of the hour, so it's time to thank our sponsors. One of our sponsors is DeMar Consulting. DeMar Consulting is a computer consulting firm, and the difference with DeMar Consulting is that they come to you. You don't have to disconnect your computer. You don't have to go anywhere. You just contact them, call them, or email them, and they will come and fix your computer problems. One thing that, when I had an experience this past week that I was like, DeMar Consulting, this would be very handy right now, and that is my father-in-law, who's in his 90s. He often has computer problems, and you're going and you're explaining things, and you're trying to fix things and get rid of the pop-ups and stuff like that. And instead of doing that, you could just call DeMar Consulting and have a professional do it at a very reasonable rate. So the ways to contact DeMar Consulting are by phone, and the phone number is 419-973-3000. That's 419-973-3000, or by email. And what you do is go online to demarconsulting.com. That's demarconsulting.com. They've got a form there. You can fill that out, and they'll get right back to you, and then they'll get out and fix your computer problems. Or they'll fix your grandparents' computer problem, or your mother-in-law's computer problem, or your father-in-law's computer problem. They really like to work with older people that are maybe a little technology challenged. So, which can be a frustrating experience if you've ever tried to explain it to someone who doesn't quite get it, and it takes a long time. Well, at DeMar Consulting, they're professionals. They can do it in a way that the customers understand. So that's DeMar Consulting. That's one of our sponsors. And another sponsor is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They're protecting natural spaces, maintaining quality green spaces, providing engaging programming, and they're teaching people to love and respect nature, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. And they've got a couple of great things coming up. One is this month, and in the next couple weeks, you could help them with their native plant greenhouse. You register at wcparks.galaxydigital.com, and you can go out and they can teach you all about native species, and you can help them grow the species, and that they're going to then sell at their native plant sale. That sale is going to take place Saturday, May 11th, and it's at the Park District headquarters on Mercer Road in Bowling Green. And you don't have to register to go to the plant sale, but you can pre-order some of your plants at wcparks.org/friends. So there's a couple ways you can volunteer. And then there's a couple just plain old fun events on March 7th, coming up next Friday from 7 to 8:30. There's going to be the Story of the Swamp at Otsego Park. And you register for that at wcparks.org. And then a couple Fridays later, Friday, March 22nd, they're going to have Wildflowers and Wildside beer and trivia at the W.W. Knight Preserve. So again, you register for that at wcparks.org. So definitely go check out the parks. And, I say these things can be frustrating sometimes, kind of like missing all the lights on your way into work. But an hour in the park, an going to one of these events, planting, buying some wildflowers, those things can make frustration like that just kind of evaporate. And that's not just a personal opinion. That actually they've done psychological studies that show this, that getting out in nature is good for you. So head on out to the Wood County Park District. Okay, so this hour is racing right along. Excuse me. We're already 3/4 of the way through. So I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I was involved in this past week. I live in Bowling Green, and the city of Bowling Green is considering an ordinance to ban plastic bags. Now, this might sound like a radical idea. I mean, plastic bags, they're ubiquitous. I mean, every time we go to the store, we get a plastic bag. I mean, look around as you're driving down the road, and you'll see plastic bags everywhere on bushes and on fences. And how could we just eliminate plastic bags? Is that even possible? Well, the answer is yes. Many cities have banned plastic bags or put fees on them. In fact, about 150 municipalities around the country have done it so far. Some of the biggest ones are like Boston and San Francisco. And turns out that their economies are still going. They banned plastic bags and commerce did not collapse. People used other things. People brought in their reusable bags. The stores started selling non-single-use plastic bags, or some stores already don't use plastic bags at all. Aldi's doesn't give plastic bags, and yet somehow Aldi's manages to keep its doors open. So there was a hearing, and a lot of people came. The place was packed. Two-thirds of the speakers were all in favor of the ban. And the one thing about these bans is that they work. It depends on if you're doing if you do a fee, it'll reduce your bag use by 60 to 80%. If you do a ban, it reduces the bag use from 80 to 95%. So if you agree that plastic bags are an environmental problem and you want to solve that problem, one way to solve the problem is to pass a ban. So this is being debated right now in Bowling Green. They had their first hearing this past week. They're going to have probably at least 2 more, maybe 3 more hearings. What do you think? At 866-240-1065, could you live with a ban on plastic bags? Do you think without that pillar your life will collapse, or do you think you'd be able to handle it? Do you think you could adapt to no more plastic bags? And one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of these plastics, these single-use plastics, which, by the way, the European Union this past week banned single-use plastics. So no plastic straws, no plastic bags, none of these containers that are designed to be used once and then thrown away. The entire European Union is going to be free from these plastic bags. And it's a good thing, too, because I went to Europe once. I went to Italy, and I went swimming, actually, on the beaches of Sicily. And there were tons of plastic bags. It was just all kinds of plastic floating in that little Mediterranean Sea there. And what happens to this plastic when it gets into the ocean is it doesn't really decompose. It doesn't sort of break down into its constituent atoms and proteins and stuff. What happens is it just breaks down into tinier and tinier pieces of plastic, and it's called microplastic pollution. And what happens is that the microorganisms that live in the water, they try to eat these things, but they're indigestible. So you get the little microscopic plankton, and inside the microscopic plankton, you have these bits of microscopic plastic floating around in there, not being digested, not being broken down. And then, of course, the web of life, the circle of life, the food chain, then little fish eat the microscopic animals, and the plastic similarly gets into their cells and doesn't break down. And then the big fish eat the little fish and get microplastics in them. And then, guess what? We are the ones who eat the big fish. And yes, we now have bits of microplastic floating around in our cells. And what happens with these little bits of plastic that are so tiny that they fit inside a cell is they can mimic hormones in the body. Your body thinks, oh, this is a little bit of estrogen. This is an estrogen molecule. And so it can cause developmental problems. It can cause disease problems. It can hurt your organs by having plastic inside of it, which probably isn't a surprise, but we have to recognize this as a problem and deal with it. And the Europeans they actually banned plastic bags a number of years ago, and now they've gone on to ban all single-use plastics. Bowling Green is ready to take the first tentative step to follow that path for a green future, to follow that sustainability. Would you be there along with them? What do you think? Do you like having the idea of having little bits of plastic inside your cells? Or would you be willing to give up your plastic bags and your plastic spoons and your plastic straws? Do you think you could live without them? Still got time to take a call, so let me know your opinion at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. Be very happy to hear from you. All right, now it is time for our letter from the future. My great-granddaughter, Marie I. She's very dependable gal. I really like her from what I've known of her letters. I'm never going to meet her because I'm never going to get into the year 2299. But here's her letter from the future. Dear great-great-grandpa, how are you doing? Things are going pretty well now in your future. Michael's hand is healing nicely. We have medical procedures you didn't have back in the 21st century. When we're born, doctors save and freeze some of our stem cells, so that later, if we get an injury like a burn, the way Michael did, those stem cells are used to speed up the healing. So he had a 3rd-degree burn last week. Next week, he'll be back to work. Work is a little different here in the future. We, quote-unquote, work only about 4 hours every day. Of course, I'm always thinking about my beloved bacteria, and I'm still working on a name for the species that I discovered last week. But we all spend a lot more time socializing and having fun than the people in your time did. Sorry about that. Part of that fun is sports. I know your show is on a sports station, and we have sports here in the future, but all of us play them as much as we watch them. Anyway, Igor is coming to visit this week. I'm excited, but Michael seems pretty glum about it. I'm sure once Igor's here, we'll all have a great time. That's it for now. I'm looking forward to opening your next letter. Love, Marie I. P.S. Stay with it. Things do get better. Another nice letter from Marie. Yeah, I'm sending her letters into the future. She has a box of them that my descendants have saved for her. So she's opening a letter from the past once a week, the same way we're opening letters from the future. So it's a kind of an odd pen pal, but it's a way. But you can also ask Marie questions about the future. You can just go to our website Joe DeMar for a Green Future. That's JOEDEMARE for a greenfuture.org, or go to our Facebook page for a Green Future, or make a comment on our YouTube page, which is also coincidentally called For a Green Future, and ask Marie a question, and I will include it in my letter to her, and then she will answer that in her next letter back to me. So you can also comment on anything about this program, whether you liked it or disliked it, and you can email us at joe@joedemar for a Green Future. So, I think we have one more caller coming up, and we just have time to take one more call. So that'll be great. The other ways to call us, you can call or text us at 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841. Or we have a podcast. This show gets rebroadcast as a podcast, and it's on a podcast company called Podomatic.com. It's Podo, Podomatic. And you can subscribe to our podcast either on Podomatic directly, or you can subscribe to it through iTunes. Just search for a Green Future. And these things are all ways you can get a hold of us, and we'd love feedback. And I have a degree in education, a master's in education, and one of the things they taught us in teacher's school is that there can be no learning without feedback. You can't improve if you don't get some idea of how you're doing. So it's 8:55. We got just time for one call, and we got one from Carrie. Carrie, you're on the line. Thanks for calling For a Green Future.
Hi, yes. As I was telling the person who answered the phone, there's a person you may be aware of called Harry Shearer, who is probably best known for being member of Spinal Tap, part of the Futures, right? Does a podcast. Mm-hmm. And he talks about microplastics quite a bit. So, and he does a lot of his work in the UK, and so he talks about that. But microplastics is, I can't. That's one of the key issues, and that, and probably the other thing I'm really most interested in right now is situation with pollinators, like bees and such.
Yeah.
As other pesticides. It's really encouraging that this show is available on this station. I hope that you continue to go and thrive, and we need to get people on board with environmental issues, and so that's all.
Well, thanks very much, Carrie, and I will continue bringing this show just as long as I can. And unfortunately, this is commercial radio, or maybe fortunately, so that depends on me being able to get enough sponsors, enough advertisers to continue to do the program. So if you wanted to contact me with some business that you might think might want to advertise on For a Green Future, or perhaps you have your own little business that wants to advertise on For a Green Future, contact me, and let's see about getting you on the air. We have very reasonable rates, and if we get enough sponsors and enough advertisers, we will keep doing this show as long as I keep breathing. So thanks very much, Carrie, for the very positive call. That's some good feedback. I appreciate it. All right. Well, in just a few minutes, we're going to be back to sports with Nick Gonzalez and the Cheap Seats. But there's one more thing I wanted to cover today, and I've had this on my list to cover for the past couple weeks. But it's another event that you can do, something you can do to help take out nuclear power. It's an event called Unplug Nuclear Power, and it's going to happen March 11th. That's the anniversary of the Fukushima disaster. And what the organizers of Unplug Nuclear Power are asking everyone to do is to take that one day, that one 24-hour period, and remember the Fukushima nuclear disaster by boycotting grid power as much as you can. Don't try not to give First Energy your money that one day, March 11th, because they're taking your money and they're using it to lobby the legislature to take more money. So March 11th, turn off all unnecessary lights. There's 4 levels of participation. One is minor conservation. Just turn off your excess lights and turn off your screens, and try to go for a day without texting or Facebook if you can. 2 is severe conservation. That is, turn off everything but your furnace and your sump pump and your essential electrical things, and use candles for lighting and so forth. 3 is go off the grid. Now, be careful with this one. You need backup power for your essential services, but if you can, on that one day, just turn off that main breaker and use your backup power, and don't give the utility companies any money. And then 4th is negative nukes, which is ideally where we should all be trying to get to, which is where you put more power on the grid through solar panels or wind power. Put more power on the grid on March 11th than you use that day. So I'm inviting everyone to participate in Unplugged Nuclear Power March 11th. And thank you all for participating in this program today. Thank you for listening for this hour. It's been great. We had great guests, Kevin Kamps, and a couple great callers. And I will be back next week with For a Green Future.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling, won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun